Hey everyone, I'm Melissa from Knitting the Stash, and this is episode 116 in the series. Welcome back to the yarn room post New Year's Day. And as promised, I did take a little bit of a break from all of the cameras and things, which was really nice. Our little family had a good holiday, New Year, just chill time. We baked some food, made some food, had some little present exchanges, and just basically hung out, played some board games, had some conversations. It was a really nice kind of quiet time around here. And yes, we're still in New York, and it is doing what we like to call ithacating outside. So if you're curious, it's a nice Sunday morning here, and by nice I mean, you know, freezing cold and precipitating in various ways. So we took our walk and it was basically misting us with ice the entire time. You know, that kind of walk where you get like the shell of ice all over you as you're walking, you're kind of cracking as you walk. So there were a couple of other brave spirits out there on the trails this morning, but we were largely alone, which is always nice for us. The dogs enjoyed it. They are enjoying the weather, I think. Even though it's a little bit cold, they like to get outside. So that's us. We've been just kind of having some downtime and enjoying all of the things we like to do. So Spencer's been splitting wood, I've been knitting, our youngest has been playing video games and just sleeping a lot because it's winter break from college. So yeah, it's been one of those nice hibernation kinds of times, I guess. So I'm glad to be back to talk to you guys about yarn and knitting and all the wonderful things. And this episode is basically New Year, New Cal. So I've had some time to think about what we want to do for this year, and I've got a good new idea for you guys, and I hope you'll join me in the Cal for this year. More on that in a minute. I also have a finished object, a pair of socks that I made for Zach, and that is going to be paired up with a tutorial that's coming out this week. Yay! About asymmetrical sock blanks, so we'll talk about that. And I have a small segment on how to kind of shop local to you if you're interested in supporting fiber producers from your area. Of course, I have the Flock Farm Yarn Shop where I'm trying to gather a lot of these small indie farm batch yarns. So if you are in an area where you can't find any small batch yarns, you can always go to the Flock Farm Yarn Shop, and I've got lots of different things over there. I'm gonna get some yarn from Cami Noise of Ranching Tradition Fiber from Montana, so that'll be the latest edition. So then we'll have yarn from let's see, Iowa, Illinois, Montana, Georgia, New Hampshire. We're trying to run the gamut there. So if you know of small farms, please get in touch with me or have them get in touch with me. I'm really trying to reach out as broadly as possible to get lots of representation in the shop. But like I said, I'm going to have a little segment on shopping local because I have a couple of farms and small producers here that I like to support in New York, and I'll give you some information about them. And yeah, I think that's... Oh, and a test knit. I do have a call for a test knit. I finished a hat for Spencer. He's going to come on at the end with a little cameo appearance wearing the hat. And if you're interested in doing a test knit for me for a beanie, you might have seen it on Instagram. That is going to be at the end. I do have a new pattern and kit coming out in just a couple weeks, so the next podcast will have that. So there's lots of really fun stuff happening, and I'm just really happy to be up in the yarn room talking to you all about it. And before we jump into the first bit of the podcast for today, I always forget to tell you where you can find me, so I'm trying to get better at remembering that. If you're looking for me, if you're looking for my classes online, if you're looking for the Flock Farm Yarn Shop with all of those small indie produced yarns, it's all on knittingthestash.com. I launched a new website this past summer, and so tried to consolidate everything. And if you want to friend me on Ravelry or check out my projects on Ravelry, I'm Knitting the Stash on Instagram as well. You can see photos. I'll pop things over there all pretty much every day, or at least a few times a week. So knittingthestash.com, and then Knitting the Stash just about everywhere else. So I'd love to hear from you guys too at knittingthestash@gmail.com. I get messages all the time, and I'm doing my best to keep up with all the email and things like that. So if you haven't heard from me yet, I will be back in touch shortly. So I think we're jumping in with New Year, New Cal. And I get questions all the time because I tend to focus this podcast on knitting sweaters and modifying sweaters and doing kind of DIY and digging into patterns, and that's what a lot of my classes are about. But I feel like at some point I don't want to leave any of the beginning knitters behind. So what I'd like to do this year is to open up a Cal knit along that's going to be called basically First to 51st. Like, you can knit your first sweater with us, you can knit your 51st sweater with us during this year, and if you need some kind of motivation, if you need a community to help you get through that first sweater, we're going to be here. And if you're knitting your 51st sweater, try something new. Try a kind of technique that you haven't tried before, a designer that you haven't tried before, a yarn you haven't tried before. Everyone is welcome, and I will open up some threads over on Ravelry so that we can chatter and ask questions of each other. And my hope is kind of like, I guess this is a Montessori philosophy. I grew up in a Montessori school with a mom who had a Montessori school, and a lot of the Montessori philosophy is like you pair up older kids with younger kids, and like they teach each other and help each other. So I kind of think of that with this KAL. Like, if you're new to sweater knitting, we're going to have experts in the KAL too, hopefully, and you guys can help each other, right? So the new sweater knitters can ask questions, and the more sweater knitters with more experience can offer to help and answer questions and offer their experiences. And in the meantime, everyone's learning and having some fun and getting a sweater at the end of it, hopefully. So we'll take the whole year. It'll be the 1st to 51st KAL, Sweater KAL. And like I said, I'll open a Ravelry thread, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you all decide to knit. And I think the first thing that I'd love to hear is like, what are you thinking about knitting? What are your big questions about sweater knitting, especially for the first time? Is it construction? Is it yarn? Is it, all the different things? And then we'll work together this year to help those first time sweater knitters be successful, and we'll also have some fun as more experienced sweater knitters trying some things with design or yarn or different pattern construction or whatever it is that you feel is going to motivate you during the year. So that's our new year, new KAL. 1st to 51st Sweater KAL, and I really hope you guys will jump in on that one. And I hope it appeals to a lot of you, because I do hear from so many of you that you're working on your first sweater or whatever, and you really want to have community. So we'll not only have the Ravelry groups, but we'll also, I'm going to try to set up some Zoom sessions so that we can all get together maybe twice a month or something like that to check in about our sweater knitting, see each other's projects actually live in person, and offer some help and advice, and just build a little bit of more of a community around here. So I hope you'll be interested. All the details will be over on the Ravelry thread, and I'll throw them in the show notes below. So yay, that's our new KAL. So my finished object for this week is actually a pair of socks. I know, not a sweater, right? Kind of unusual for me. I do knit socks. My youngest son, Zach, actually said to me, "Hey mom, if you ever wanted to, knit me another pair of socks, I would totally like that, because I love the ones you knit me." So it's like, it warms my knitter's heart. So I had to, of course, immediately break out like 5 different sock yarns and patterns and decide what I was going to make him. So I settled on the country sock pattern by Nancy Bush, which is the pattern that I've used for his socks before. And this comes from the Folk Socks book, which I love very much. It's a kind of tour through Northern European traditions, lots of different styles of socks and knitting techniques, different heels and toes and all that kind of thing. And the country socks are these guys. And his socks look almost identical to this because I knit them in the yarn that was called for in the pattern. It's a, what is this? This is the, Brown Sheep Company Nature Spun sock. And they have held up so well in that particular yarn. I actually purchased a couple more balls of that yarn because I'm going to knit him, multiple socks since he asked for them. And he seems to really appreciate them and like them and wear them a lot. So my next pair will probably be in a green or a blue version of this. The reason I like this pattern is because it offers a very stretchy kind of rib, modified rib, for both the leg of the sock and the foot of the sock. So I find with hand knit socks, if you just knit them in stockinette, they tend to scrunch down and they don't really stay up very well. But when you use this pattern, or any pattern that has a good substantial bit of ribbing to it, it's gonna just produce a sock that's gonna stay up on the leg a little bit better. So I like that pattern, but I'm not a big fan of the toe closure. She does a kind of spiral round toe at the end of that sock. So I always break out my trusty, this is Susan B. Anderson's How I Make My Socks pattern. And I think I've showed it to you guys before. This is my version of it, and you can see that it is tattered and worn. It's perfectly foldable, and you can take it with you everywhere. It's got the little Kitchener notes on a post-it note over here. It has everyone's sizes, from my dad and Spencer to our old friends Amy and Steve to Zach to myself, like how many stitches to cast on, how big everybody's feet are, all that kind of stuff. So it is my go-to pattern for, I really like the heel and I like the toe on this pattern. So it is my go-to pattern, and I often stick it in my sock books wherever I'm working and kind of play whatever socks I'm working off of that kind of pattern. So that's what I ended up doing for Zach's socks, and I'll show them to you here. And yes, they're knit in the same yarn, but it's a really fun sock blank that was from Megan Morell of Old Crow ArtYarns from a sock club that she used to run. And this was the Jaws colorway. And you can probably guess why. We've got a little bit of ocean, we got a little bit of, you know, shark attack. So this was a sock blank, started life as a sock blank. And I actually, like I said, I have a tutorial that's going to be coming out this week about how to work with asymmetrical sock blanks to produce socks that are actually somewhat similar, right? Even if they come out with different colors, making use of the full sock blank, they have some kind of symmetry to them. So in this case, I took the kind of variegated portion of the sock blank and used that for the cuffs, in part because it's a Jaws theme, so you wanted to think about the horror of the shark kind of swimming in and like biting you on the, anyway. I could go on. But we've got the blue ocean here as a focus, and we've got the blood red sea here as the other focus. This is just something that I think would appeal to my kid. You know, he likes color, he likes things that are interesting, have a good story behind them, so that's why these socks ended up as they are. Let me show you what I mean about the ribbing. I think you can see it here. It is a modified rib, so in between here there's an interesting stitch that's filling in the kind of gap. These portions are just stockinette, as you might imagine. And you can see that this rib gets carried all the way down to the top of the foot. And I've got the, I like this heel. It's the, what is that, the eye of partridge or something, and then the heel flap and the gusset is just the way I like to do my heels, and that's how Nancy Bush does them in her pattern, as well as Susan B. Anderson. And then this is Susan B. Anderson's basic toe, which is also just, I think, I'm not sure what, I'm not a sock knitter like a lot, so I can't remember what this toe is called, but it's your basic toe where you're knitting two together and then slipping your marker and then slip knitting twice over on your sock. And you kind of create this band of decreases, and then you Kitchener the front of the toe together. So yeah, so I'll have the tutorial out later this week about that asymmetrical sock blank action, but I pretty much think these are awesome. And for these I did cast on 74 stitches, for those of you who are wondering. This is a fingering weight yarn, about 400 and some yards per 4 ounces, typical sock weight kind of yarn. And I cast on an extra 2 stitches that were not called for in the pattern just because they're going to be a little taller, and I wanted to make sure that they were going to fit around his calf. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else special about these. I think not. I think that's the specialness is just the fact that they came out symmetrical, even though it was an asymmetrical sock blank. So more on that tutorial later. If you're wondering, I get questions sometimes about the needles that I use to knit various things like socks and sweaters and things. For socks, I use the Chiagoo Interchangeables, and these were, I was introduced to these by Beth of my wonderful knitting and spinning group. These are, so they have adjustable tips, like, you know, interchangeable tips, and you do have to break out the little tool to be able to get them off very easily because they do crank on pretty tightly. And I found if you do crank them on like you're supposed to with your special tool and your whatever, they stay together pretty darn well for interchangeable needles. I have to say I like the Addy Clicks the best. I know there's a big controversy about that, but I do like Addy Clicks a lot, and if Addy made a small sock knitting set of needles, I would choose them. But since they don't, and since I like Chiagoo's needles, especially their fixed circulars, a lot, I decided to go ahead and invest in this set. So it's just a little Chiagoo set, looks like this. Your needles, I think it comes with 3 cords, and it comes with, the needles all come in this little package here, and they start at 000 or 1.5 millimeter all the way up to size 1.5 millimeter. They've got the US sizes and the millimeter sizes on there. So I tend to use 1s, which are 2.25 millimeters for my socks. And these guys come with, like I said, a bunch of different tips and cords, and then you've got your little case of the little bits of equipment that you need to tie all of the, or attach all of the needles to the cords. And they're quite small and quite portable, so you can throw them in your knitting bag, which is really nice. And like I said, I have lots of interchangeable Addie sets, which I love, but they don't make them small enough. Addie, if you're listening, we need smaller needles. But the Chiagoos are awesome for socks and for small projects like mittens or sleeves of fingering weight sweaters or things like that. So I would recommend them. Beth introduced me to them, and I really do quite love them. So yeah. And for those of you who are wondering about Megan Morrell of Old Crow ArtYarns, she's the one who designed the sock blank for the Jaws colorway. I posted about this on Instagram, and a few of you were just like excited about her colorways. And I think she's a brilliant indie dyer, so I thought this would be a good moment to just show you some of her wares. She does, as I mentioned, she started doing this thing, instead of doing ready to ship all the time, she does a pre-sale each kind of season, so you can go in and you're more likely to be able to get the actual colorways that you want, because I can tell you, I would be there just like spamming her site when I knew she was coming out with new colorways, because I love her stuff. I have a huge collection of it, and I just love all of her different colorways. So this is a nice way, if you're interested in getting her colorways, you can actually get them now because there's pre-order, so you can just pop over, pick out the ones you want, and then she mails them out. She does a big dye batch or two and then mails them out at a certain date. So I tried to pick a few of the yarns that are now being offered on pre-order that she's done before. So for example, this is Smoke, which is just, I don't know if you can make it out on the camera. It's beautiful purples, a little bit of speckling, and just some variegation. So it has some of the light and the dark. This is a fingering weight, yes. And her sock weight tends to be about 415 yards for 100 grams. And she does this blend of superwash merino 75% and nylon 25%. And I know that I'm a big proponent of using 100% wool, non-superwash for a lot of things, but as I've always said on this podcast, I think there's a place for every kind of yarn, and I do think that superwash merino can be really great for knitting things that need to be washed, like socks, and things for babies, or different kinds of projects, gift projects that you're going to give to someone who may not know how to hand wash something. Superwash merino can be the way to go for those kinds of projects. So this is Smoke, which is, I believe, one of the updates in her pre-sale right now. The Archer is also one of her offerings right now, and the Archer is, again, a little bit of the solid brown and blue, and then some speckles throughout. So I think that one's really pretty. But she also will often offer different tonal sets or tonal yarns. So this one is called Goldenrod, and this one is called Night Sky. And I think I got them together because we were going to do a shawl knit, but I haven't gotten around to knitting the shawl yet. But I love her tonals, which have become more and more of a thing that she's kind of dyeing up lately. I think she does beautiful work with them, and I really kind of want to get a sweater's quantity of her, one of her colors. I love her blues, and I'm not usually a yellows person or a green person, but I love her greens. So these are just some of her, just to give you an idea of in person, like what her yarns look like. You've seen one of them knitted up now in the Jaws colorway, and then these are some of my collection of Old Crow ArtYarns. I'm kind of like kicking myself a little bit because I kind of want to keep her for myself. Like, I really do love her yarn, and sometimes it's hard to get a hold of it. But I also love that she has expanded out into the world, and so many other people have found her and love her yarn and her colorways. So I think it's important to spread the word about dyers that you truly love and that you support their work. So that is Megan Morrell of Old Crow ArtYarns, and I will put a link to her Etsy shop in the show notes down below in case you're interested in checking out that pre-sale that she's doing right now for some of these colorways. Sadly, not the Jaws colorway. I have to talk to her. I'll send her a message and just be like, we need Jaws back, Megan. We need Jaws. So in the last segment of the podcast, I wanted to offer some advice about how to find small batch yarns near you to support locally if you're interested in that kind of thing. And as I said, the Flock Farm Yarn Shop is trying to collect all of these small batch farms and put them in one place so that you can go peruse them all and find them all more easily. But for those of you who are also interested in looking in your area, here's a little bit of advice about how to find indie small batch yarns around you. And this is something that I focused on for a long time before I opened up the Flock Farm Yarn Shop. So I feel like I've learned a little bit about how to find these places. The first bit of advice is to look at farmers markets. Now this might seem like the most obvious bit of advice, but it's often the easiest way to find small batch farms and yarns around your area. So at these farmers markets or small gift fairs or other kinds of fairs in your area, you'll often find vendors who will set up, a table, and they'll put out their yarn or their handspun or their fiber or whatever it is, and you can get to know them. They're usually there with their products, so you can actually chat with them and talk to them about their flocks, and it's really a wonderful way to get to know them. Now, if you don't have farmers markets available in your area, you can also look at, there are a few websites actually that are trying to create searchable databases for local small batch, farm yarn that's across the country. So I'll put some links to those in the show notes. There's a fiber shed movement going on. I've seen it especially in the Midwest and in New York and out in California, where basically groups of growers are trying to get together to enhance their profile. So they'll create a kind of fiber shed in New York or in Wisconsin or in California, and that way producers in those areas can get together and help each other. They'll set up websites, or they'll have collective shows. Around here in New York, they just did a fiber pop-up shop where a lot of the local growers were able to set up a table and put out their yarn or their fiber and talk to people, even in a pandemic. This was kind of before Omicron, but anyway, it was a nice way for a group of makers and producers to get together and find each other. So if you can look for fiber sheds in your area, check out these websites that I'll post below, and look for those local kind of moments when producers are trying to get together to enhance their profile. My third suggestion would be to check out your local guilds, because oftentimes guilds will include producers. So for me, that was the case in Illinois. I met Kathy, who was a huge producer for the Shore Yarns for this will be our 4th year running. And she and I ended up becoming friends. I would help at shearing. I hosted her sheep on our back pasture. It was just like a wonderful experience. And that was all because of my local guild and meeting the people, and then finally, finding the producers in the area and getting connected with them, and, building friendships and relationships with them and learning about their sheep. And it's one of those things it can be a really wonderful experience if you want to go that route to find out who the makers are in your area. Oftentimes makers or producers in your area don't always have the time to get their information about their sheep and their flocks out there into the world. So they kind of depend on things like guilds and fiber sheds and the Flock Farm Yarn Shop to help people know that they are in existence. They're focused on their sheep and their yarn, and they're less focused on marketing or getting the word out about their particular flock or what they're doing. So they're not as easy to find unless you know to look for guilds or fiber sheds or farmers markets or things like that. So I'll tell you about a couple that I found in New York that are not actually in the Flock Farm Yarn Shop yet. I'm kind of hoping that I can figure out a way to get them in the Flock Farm Yarn Shop. Sometimes the issue is actually, in one of these cases, they just don't have a big flock of sheep. So producing enough yarn to get something into the shop becomes the issue. But that doesn't mean you can't support them more locally where you are. And that's what I feel like doing. So let me tell you about 2 of them. So one of them is Flora and Fauna Farm, and that's Ash and Matt. And I talked to you about them a while back and introduced you to their flock of sheep. And I knit up, Ash sent me some lovely yarn, and I knit up a bunch of different projects to show off all the different great qualities of their yarn on a podcast episode a little ways back, and I'll link to that in the show notes so you can go back and check out that whole podcast if you're interested. This is the Mirkwood scarf, which is a free pattern, beautiful lace pattern that I knit up in their Thoreau yarn, and this was a 2-ply, really light, beautiful, not quite a lace weight, but a fingering weight yarn. in natural colors. It's just beautiful. It came out really beautifully, and it has a beautiful drape to it, and it's a beautiful scarf. And so that's Flora and Fauna farm yarn, and they are in central New York, so really close by to me, and they have a flock of registered Romney sheep. So I met Ash on Instagram. As usual, I'm following a lot of farms and producers around on Instagram, and that's how she and I got to talking. And yeah, we've had some nice correspondence. I'm hoping to meet the flock sometime soon once the weather breaks a little bit. So yeah, Flora and Fauna Farm, they do have a shop online, so you can, and they do fiber festivals. That's the other way, of course, to meet producers, is to go to fiber festivals around you. So they do have a shop, and I will post all their information down below in the show notes. The other one that I've been interested in for a long time is Forget Me Not Farm. And Forget Me Not Farm is in Candor, New York, and they raise Jacob sheep, and they have a much smaller flock. So when I first found them at the farmer's market in Ithaca, I was able to purchase a little bit of fiber there. And then I just noticed on their Facebook feed that they actually took their fiber and fleece from this past year and broke it into the different shades of Jacob that they have. So Jacob sheep are spotted sheep, and oftentimes their fleece can have lilac in it, which is a brown kind of color. They can have grays, lighter whites, like all different colors on a Jacob fleece. So they separated out their fleece into grays and browns basically, and had their fiber spun up at Bat and Kill Fibers, which I've talked about before. Bat and Kill is one of the big fiber mills in New York, and they put it up for sale on Facebook and on their website. So I, of course, jumped over there and asked if I could get some of the beautiful gray, which is this. And this is, each one of these is 100 grams and about 220 yards. So it's a DK weight, I would say. Really soft, really well spun. Everything I've seen from Bat and Kill has been amazing. We have yarn in the Flock Farm Yarn shop from Georgia, Gulf Coast native yarn that was spun at Bat and Kill, and I love the work that they do. They're just evenly spun, not overspun, just well prepared and well spun yarn. So this is the Jacob from Forget Me Not Farm, which is local to me in Candor, New York. So I didn't get to meet everyone because of the pandemic, but Jen and Blessing were really kind, and they made up a nice bag for me, and they put it in their farm stand, which is a beautiful little shed toward the driveway at the end of their farm. And they offered, of course, to let me meet the flock, and I said, okay, when the pandemic is coming to an end and the weather is better, I'd love to come out again and meet all the sheep. So that's the plan. I'm planning to go over and meet the Romney sheep. I'm planning to meet the Jacob sheep. It's going to be fun. And of course, Ash and Matt, and hopefully Jen and Blessing. And I know that Forget Me Not Farm, they not only do Jacob sheep, but they also, Jen is an herbalist, a longtime herbalist, and they also have a farm share, a CSA. And they just seem like cool people who are really interested in getting back to the land and producing food and nutrients and herbal everything and yarn and just all the wonderful things that a lot of us appreciate and enjoy. So if you're interested in Forget Me Not Farm, they do have a website. They have farm stays if you happen to be anywhere near New York. They have a beautiful little cottage that has it would be perfect in the summertime. They have a little outdoor bath space and just a little cottage up on the hill. It seems really quiet, and I don't know, I think I'd kind of like to go stay out there someday. So they do farm stays, they have the CSA, and like I said, it's all up on their website. So they offer classes as well. So if you're ever in New York and you want to check them out, I think that would be a good route to go. So as many of you know, since if you've been following this podcast for very long, I was often featuring a lot of these producers and farms long before the Flock Farm Yarn Shop came into existence. And it's been one of the fun things in life to kind of meet these producers all across the country, do interviews with them, meet their flocks when I can, and try to support all the work that they're doing, because it's not easy to keep these flocks of sheep up and running. It costs money for feed, and you need to have pasture, and there's veterinary bills, and there's lambing, and there's 10 other thousand things that go on with sheep flocks in order to keep them healthy and happy and thriving. So I really admire these producers who are out there sticking with their flocks, growing their flocks, and then producing beautiful yarn that we use as knitters. I think it's so cool to know where your yarn comes from. So if you're looking for ways to support local fiber in your area. Like I said, I'll post all these suggestions below in the show notes with links, and I hope you'll get out there, meet some flocks, and find some fun yarn where you can actually pet the sheep that it came from. So as promised, we have Mr. Spencer on the cast today.
There appears to be a hat for me to
There is.
demonstrate.
Oh wait, I should have wrapped it up for Christmas, though I did. So this was a hat that I knit for Spencer because he designed this. I call it Spencer's spiral.
Design's kind of a strong word for
He
what happened.
doodled it one day on a napkin.
It was like a favorite doodle of mine. Did I say, can you incorporate this into
Yeah,
a...
you said if you ever can figure that out. So I call it Spencer's spiral, but it's going to be the slalom beanie, and you like to like wear it high on the head.
I put it down. However you, hey man, whatever you stipulate.
Come here. Let's just try it this way for a minute. I know it just drives you crazy. He can't handle that. Anyway, this is the slalom beanie, and it is I'm doing a test knit for this particular hat because Spencer was kind enough to say, well, maybe you should just turn the pattern into like a pattern. So I did. Well, I feel like it's a gift. It should be a gift. It should be like a unique object, but he was like...
Mass produced that baby.
Yeah.
So, I thought it was a cool hat. And it was kind of... I thought it was really just neat to see the spirally thing, spiral keep.
So
in action.
So it's up for test knit right now.
So what are you doing? Test knitting? You're finding people?
Yeah, I have a couple test knitters, but I've got a couple other open slots and aiming for like February, I can't remember what I said, February 1st, something like that? February 10th or something to be done knitting it, yeah.
You're going to knit 3 sizes?
So I've got 3 sizes. I got 19-inch, we got 21.5-inch, and we've got 24. And this is the 24 because Spencer has a very large head. So
I'm a little,
it was
in that way.
It was interesting to kind of take the 24-inch hat and try to like shrink it down to the 21 and the 19. Anyway, that's
because of the pattern.
Yeah,
because you had to keep the pattern going on.
Is a little bit tricky.
Worked it out.
It's worked out. So if you're interested in test knitting, send me an email at knittingthestash@gmail.com to get on the test list. And I'd love to have a few more knitters on there. This one is knit in the Rosa Pomar
what's the colorway?
Brusca. This is a different colorway because I'm going to make another one myself and test knit it. So this is I'm going to do a blue as the main color and a white as a contrast color on the second version.
What's the weight of this yarn?
It's weird. It says it's a worsted weight yarn, but it is not a worsted weight yarn. It is it's like a fingering weight yarn, or maybe a DK if you're...
Y'all haven't straightened out your weights yet? You're still using those funny Worcester,
they're all
fingering...
Funny. Yeah. It's one of the things I always talk about is like, don't go by the title, like the name of the yarn. You got to go by the grist. You got to go by the yards per ounce or the meters per gram.
A little technical over here.
Whatever it is. Anyway. But if you're interested in test knitting...
It's a cool hat. I think you'll enjoy it when it comes out. Or
Let me know. Yeah, and it should come out later, and then when it does come out, I'll talk to you all about it, but I can't talk about it right now because, you know...
Oh, all the details?
Yeah, I gotta keep a little bit under our hat.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on the cast to show us your lovely new hat.
Absolutely.
You should take this with you, since it's your gift.
Thank you very much.
So that's about it for today. I know we covered a lot of territory. I'll put all the links in the show notes below in case you're interested in checking out any of the yarn producers or indie dyers or patterns that I talk about on this episode. So I hope you're all well and enjoying the new year. I hope you'll join us in the 1st or 51st Sweater KAL. I'll get those threads up on Ravelry right away, and that'll be going all year long. So even if you find this particular episode later on in the year, you can always jump in the mix with our KALs because they go on for a long time to give everybody a chance to get in there and get some making done and get some learning done. Yeah, I hope you're well. I'll see you on the next episode. Take good care. Bye-bye.